Grace, peace, and joy be unto you from God the Father and our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. Amen. In our Old Testament lesson for today, we get a glimpse of one of the most famous leadership transitions in all of Scripture. Elijah and Elisha are walking along, having this incredibly interesting dialogue with intrigue swirling around them with what seems to be the worst kept secret in all the land. The Lord was about to do something new. And the incredible shadow of Elijah on the spiritual life of the people was about to be replaced by Elisha. He already stood there in awe of Elijah and everything he could do. You can imagine why he wanted to have a double portion of Elijah's spirit. We knew how important that he was. Can you imagine them watching him swirl off in a chariot of fire into the heavens? At a conference where we hear a good speaker, we often say something like, boy, imagine having to follow that act. But a chariot ascending into heaven in a whirlwind, now that is hard to top. I often tell the story of the intimidation I felt when I first read the paperwork for Prince of Peace before I interviewed here. I looked over all the statistics that described the ministry of Prince of Peace, and it all looked really great until I got to one particular figure that stopped me dead in my tracks. Pastor Tom began his ministry here in 1971. It was a familiar year for me. It was the year I was born. When I came to Prince of Peace, I was following a pastor that had served here as long as I had been alive. That was a little intimidating. And statistically speaking, it should have spelled doom for my tenure. Congregational dynamic experts would tell you that Prince of Peace was poised to have what they call an unintentional interim pastor. Collective wisdom says that it's too difficult to make the transition from one leader to another because of the pressures of change are just too great. And a new leader invariably becomes the scapegoat for the discomfort of inevitable change after such a long tenure. I lived with that potential shadow over my ministry here for some time, and there were certainly moments when it seemed likely that it was all going to blow up. But now here we are. I'm about to mark my 12th year in ministry of Prince of Peace and begin my 13th year. There are many reasons why I think this has worked. Certainly a primary one is the graciousness of Pastor Tom. Well, again, those same experts would tell you to have Pastor Tom come back to worship in the congregation less than a year after he left is a big no-no with disaster written all over it. But instead, I have consistently said what a blessing it is to have Tom in the congregation. Particularly at the most difficult moments in ministry, he has been there to offer his support and encouragement. We've certainly been blessed with interpersonal synergy that has facilitated leadership transition, but there were other dynamics that were critical, including superb lay leadership, staff members, the overall health of the congregation. And as important as the individual dynamics are, there is an overarching principle that really is central to the health of the congregation. It's important to the ongoing vitality of this place. My dad often talked about this dynamic when he was working with troubled congregations up in northeastern Ohio. He said then that the number one predictor of the congregation's chances of getting past their strife hinged upon their ability to pivot away from interpersonal conflict toward shared mission. And without a doubt, if I had to point to one critical dynamic that has enabled the vitality of ministry that we've experienced at Prince of Peace leading up to my time here and now in my 12 years of ministry, it's a congregational commitment to shared mission. We took what was a longer mission statement a few years ago and boiled it down to our current statement that I just was talking about with the kids a little bit ago, to live and love like Jesus. Paul recognized the importance of mirroring the sacrificial love of Jesus from the very beginning of the church. Already then, there were people gathered in that early community of the church that were distorting the message of Jesus and focusing instead on their own glory, their own personal self-interest. And Paul pointedly identifies this as the work of the God of this world, in other words, the work of the devil. Paul urges the church to reject this focus and recognize that the work of Jesus looks like Jesus. It looks like his love, his forgiveness, his grace, and his peace. Our gospel lesson for today reveals the focus that Jesus has on this loving service. He's there in the glorious company of the greatest religious leaders known to the Jewish people. Moses and Elijah are right there. His disciples rightly notice that this is some company that's worth keeping. They want to stay right there in the glory of that moment. But Jesus knows that his mission is to serve. He's not starstruck. He's prepared to go right back down the mountain to serve the people with love and grace. A friend of mine that some of you know, Pastor Kai Nielsen, just celebrated his 25th year of serving as pastor of Peace Lutheran Church in Gahanna. And as he was reflecting on his time there, he was reflecting on the privilege that it is to lead a community that is seeking to embody God's mission in the world. As he did, he quoted a line from a poet, Clarissa Pinkola Estes. She writes this about living life focused on God's mission in the world. She said, "My friends, do not lose heart. We were made for these times. I've heard from so many recently who are deeply and properly bewildered. They're concerned about the state of affairs in our world now. Ours is a time of almost daily astonishment and often righteous rage over the latest degradations of what matters most to civilized, visionary people. In any dark time, there's a tendency to veer towards fainting over how much is wrong or unmended in the world. Do not focus on that. There is a tendency, too, to fall into being weakened by dwelling on what is outside your reach, by what cannot yet be. Do not focus there. We are needed, that is all we can know. And though we meet resistance, we more so will meet great souls who will hail us, love us, and guide us. And we will know them when they appear. Didn't you say you were a believer? Didn't you say you pledged to listen to a voice greater? Didn't you ask for grace? Don't you remember that to be in grace means to submit to the voice greater? Ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Any small, calm thing that one soul can do to help another soul, to assist some portion of this poor, suffering world, will help immensely. It is not given to us to know which acts or by whom will cause the critical mass to tip towards the enduring good. It's certainly easy to lose heart these days. All you have to do is turn on the news, and it's not just our national news cycle. Just look around locally, and it can feel like we're taking some big step backwards. Racial insults on jerseys and things correctly. 2 local leading institutions of learning turned into an ugly show of blatant racism as St. X players were taunted by elder students this last week. And the thing that was most disturbing to me was that it was allowed to continue without parents and school leaders immediately stepping in to stop it. Now, as always, the church must be a central voice and a witness to what it looks like to tip towards the enduring good. We must be a voice and a witness to what love and justice, peace and reconciliation look like when enacted in a loving community, constituted to be the hands and feet of Jesus in the world. It's a gift to live in a community that is created to have as its focus a commitment to embodying God's love and hope in the weary world. Each one of us is called through our baptism into Christ to keep our eyes off of selfish ambition so that our focus can be on service to others for the sake of God's mission in the world. On Transfiguration Sunday, it's always important to hear how Jesus was lifted up as God's Son, but even more important it is to hear where the focus of Jesus lies in that moment, in every moment of his servant life. Listen to him and to his life. His focus is to come back down the mountain, to share the grace and love of God for all.